All right, we're going to get started in just a minute. So as everybody's logging in here. All right. And Eric, I just made you a panelist. Can you go ahead and see if you can get your video on as well?
Oh, it says it can't start video because host has stopped it.
The what?
It says I can't start the video because host has stopped it.
Okay. So it's not letting you activate your video?
Yeah.
Hold on 1 second. One second. All right. I'm making you a host, see if that changes it. Oh, there you go.
I'm in business.
Awesome. Well, we got people joining in right now, so we'll give them about 2 more minutes and then we'll go ahead and get started, man.
Of course. Of course. How you been?
Good, man. How you doing?
Keeping busy. Keeping busy. Trying to help out as many people as I can right now. It's my mission.
I know, man. I'm excited for you to do this today. Like, definitely a lot of value. And man, I saw you talking about this last week on Facebook, and you seem to have as much knowledge of anybody, if not more, on at least the guidelines coming out. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, I've been actively working on it. Even the PPPs, everything changes every day, which I think is fascinating and interesting. Even on the banking side of things, like a lot of banks are having challenges like actually implementing this.
mhm.
It's crazy. Like Wells Fargo, they shut down all new applications because they have too many. Chase just shut down all new applications like yesterday. Bank of America is just taking information. Like nobody's figured it out.
Yeah.
It's a mess. It's a mess. So I'm just helping my clients navigate it, just trying to help average business owners navigate it so that way you know what to expect and what to look out for.
Well, awesome. Well, we'll follow up after this webinar because I definitely have some questions for our business for you as well that we want to expand on. So, well,
Oh,
people are going to keep joining in. So let's go ahead and get started. I am going to record this. So if you're on this or if you weren't able to make it, we'll have a replay of this as well that we'll email out to all the attendees as well as Eric's information if you guys need to follow up with him or want to connect and engage with his business as well. So I'd like to introduce Eric. He is the cash flow doctor. I met Eric probably several years ago at an entrepreneur conference. I think it was in Las Vegas, and then in California, we got to know each other at some mastermind group. This guy really, when it comes to money and taxes and anything above, he's the go-to guy that I talk to and my team members talk to when they have tax issues or questions. So Eric, I'm going to let you kind of go ahead and get started kind of on government resources, SBA, and everything that's going on right now.
yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me. And good afternoon, everybody who's on the call today. My name is Eric Niem again. I'm out of Orange County, California. And just give you a little bit of context and history so it creates a little bit of context on what I'm talking about. I've been an entrepreneur since I was 16. I'm 41 now, so over 26 years of just hustling and grinding it, just like all of you out there. And I've experienced two different recessions as an entrepreneur. The one in 2001 after 9/11, and the one in 2008 when the bank collapse happened. So I have this really interesting experience of being through recessions before and knowing kind of what to expect and what to look out for. In the last 10 years, I've been working as a tax strategist. I used to have a large tax preparation practice back in Massachusetts. Central Mass is where I used to live, Worcester to be exact. And I had 4 offices, over 2,500 clients that we would service every year. And moved out to California about like 5 years ago to focus just on consulting for entrepreneurs when it comes to tax strategy. I come in as a fractional CFO for a lot of companies. And in the last couple of weeks, as we all know, we're experiencing from watching the news and everything, this pandemic has really hit the country by storm. Now, whether you have different political beliefs or not, or beliefs in what's going on with the pandemic or not, that's all immaterial because the reality is it's impacting all of our businesses. And so as this started unfolding and unrolling, I had a lot of clients that started reaching out to me saying, hey, Eric, you know what? Our revenue has been impacted, our income has been impacted. What can we do to continue paying the bills and paying our employees? And so I started looking to these two new programs that came out from the SBA and from the federal government. And I've become really intimately connected with both of these. I've been spending the last week and a half or so, I would say from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. every day, just talking to entrepreneurs, business owners like you and I on how to apply for these programs, how to take advantage of these programs, and how to utilize them to keep our businesses running sustainably through this economic challenge that we're all dealing with. So I wanted to break down each one of them to just clear the air, because I know there's a lot of questions on the two different programs: how to apply, how to qualify, what does it mean, is there forgiveness? And even on the back side of it, me working with all the clients that I'm working with, applying for these programs, the challenges that I've faced and seen, so that way you're not caught by surprise when you're trying to apply on your own, or if you were to hire me and my team to help you with that as well. So there's two programs that were unrolled out, and the first one I'm going to talk about today is called the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, or EIDL. This one was released about 2 weeks ago, and it originally was designed for a streamlined process where people would apply online and then instantly or very quickly get hooked up with an SBA loan officer and then go through a loan process, get approved, and get funded to help cover operations. So I want to just talk about how this one works. So I wrote on the whiteboard, I don't know if it's mirror imaged or not, but I can read it from here. But basically the EIDL is a program that is applied for online. They had 3 versions of the website. It first opened up 2 weeks ago. Over 15,000 people applied on the same day, caused the website to crash. Then they released a second revision of it half a week later. That one crashed. And now they're on this third revision where basically on the tail end of it, when you apply, you basically put in your bank account information to request this up to a $10,000 grant. So it's a really interesting program. And here basically the breakdown of it: any business owner can apply, regardless if you're a DBA, a sole proprietor, an LLC, S corporation, C corporation. Any business that's been in operation prior to January 31st, 2020 can apply for this program. Now, what is this program all about? This program is going to allow you to get up to a $10,000 grant. Now, it's not instant free $10,000. They'll give you up to a $10,000 grant. They haven't specified like what the qualifications are to get that max grant. And the folks that have applied on day one, nobody has had a conversation with an SBA loan officer yet. So none of us really know exactly what they're qualifying that based on. And as that rolls out, as folks actually start getting in touch with SBA, I'll be more than happy to update it through one of the Facebook Lives that I do on my Facebook channel. You're borrowing at 3.75% up to 10 or 15 years. So you get up to $10,000 grant, and anything above and beyond that yet you apply for a loan to help you operate your business. It's at a really low interest rate. Most credit cards right now are 19, 20, 21, 23%. You're borrowing at 3.75% for 10 or 15 years from the federal government. And this is to help you cover your operations expenses. This is not to help you scale or advertise or buy another business. The whole intention of this loan product is for business owners that have had their revenue impacted, but they still want to continue operating their business, and they need some help from the government to help cover their rent, utilities, overhead, payroll, insurance, things like that. It's a super simple underwriting process, and you get up to $2 million in loan value. So a lot of folks ask me, wow, $2 million, that's a lot of money. Basically, they're going to probably, and again, because nobody in America at this point has spoken to a loan officer for this program that I'm aware of, we don't know what their qualifications are. But what I'm assuming is they're going to take your monthly expense, your monthly overhead costs, and multiply it by 2 or 3 and determine your loan value based on that. So let's say for you to operate your business between your office, your employees, your insurance, your utilities, and all that stuff, you're spending, let's just say 10 grand per month. Well, with a potential, in my mind, a 3x multiplier on that, because they want to help cover you for 2 or 3 months, they're going to give you a $30,000 loan. Up to $10,000 of it is a grant. Now, let's say if they gave you a max 10 grand, that means you're borrowing 20 grand from the feds. They gave you 10 grand for free money. Okay. So it's a pretty interesting product that's designed, again, to help keep the economy going, to help keep businesses going. Because here's the thing. What a lot of people don't realize is, yeah, there's a lot of big companies out there, like IBM, Boeing, Raytheon, GE, and they employ a lot of people. But they only employ 40% of the workforce, the American workforce. What a lot of folks don't realize is small business owners like you and I, we actually employ over 60% of the entire American workforce. So it's in the government's vested interest to help small businesses stay alive and stay afloat during this challenging time frame right now. Now, the whole process on how to apply for it, a lot of folks say, Eric, okay, that sounds like a really cool program. I could get up to 10 grand of grant money, and that's free money. Okay, cool. And I could borrow additional amount of funds from the federal government to help me operate my business. Okay, cool. Now, how does it work? How do I apply for it? There's an online portal with the SBA where you would apply for this, pretty streamlined process. On the back side of it, you're going to need to have your P&Ls for your business, your profit and loss. Profit and loss is basically something that's spit out from either QuickBooks or Xero, whatever accounting software you use, that reports the revenue brought in and the expenses that you came out. You're going to need a P&L for 2019 and also for 2020 to validate and show that you were, running a business in 2020 before this coronavirus thing happened. You're also going to need to be able to show tax returns to the SBA to show and validate that it's a legitimate business in your operations. They will pull a credit check on you individually to make sure you're a valid person. And I believe as long as you have a credit score of 640 or above, you'll be good to go. I don't know if there are credit requirements on it, but I do know that the SBA says that there's no collateral and there's no recourse, which is unique. Most SBA loans, like the 7A or the 504 that most business owners get to buy a business, to grow a business and everything, they used to have to collateralize it, meaning that you have to pledge your house up against a loan. If something was happening to a loan, then they're a lien holder on your house. But they don't do that anymore, not for this particular relief products. There's no collateralization needed, which is really cool. And there's no recourse, meaning, yeah, they'll pull personal credit to make you a legit person. You have the ability to repay. But if something was to happen to your business, it's not going to fall on you individually. This note isn't going to fall on you individually. So this is the EIDL program. At the very least, I recommend all entrepreneurs that are on this call to be applying for this program. There's a limited amount of funding available for it. And I don't want to sound like a TV infomercial guy, like buy now and get free shipping, but wait, there's more. The reality is there's $10 billion that was allocated for this particular program and for the grant side of it. To give you an idea of context of volume, the first application I submitted for a client was last Saturday, not this previous weekend, but the previous Saturday. He was application number 1740. I submitted applications for clients yesterday, a number of them, and at this point, we're at application number 868,000. So in just about a week, almost 900,000 business owners have applied for this EIDL program. So the funds are going to run out sooner than later. If you haven't applied for it, or if you applied for it in the old format where you're uploading documents to it, I highly recommend reapplying or considering reapplying with the new portal where it's streamlined. It asks you for a bank account, routing, and direct deposit information number, and then the box that checks off to say, yes, I would like to request up to a $10,000 grant. So that's that program called the EIDL. If there's any questions, just pop them in the chat. If you're using Zoom, there's a little chat button at the bottom of it. If you have any questions on that program, please feel free to ask the questions, and I'll answer questions as I go along with it. So that's the EIDL. That's program number 1.
Hey, Eric, real quick, Michelle asked a question. I think you kind of answered it, but is the $10,000 grant automatic? And what if we decide not to do the EIDL and just get the PP loan, which is forgivable? Do we have to pay back the $10,000 grant?
Got it. Great question. So the EIDL, it's up to $10,000, just to be clear, and it's a grant. So you get the grant whether you get accepted or denied for the loan. Now, from my understanding, you have the ability of also declining the loan on the back end of it. So let's say if you get approved for the EIDL, you get approved for a $10,000 grant, and they also say, hey, we also approve you for 15 grand of a loan. From what I understand, and again, we haven't heard any conversations fall out of the SBA yet, but from an SBA officer that I spoke to, he had said that you can decline the loan part of it and keep the grant. Now, on the flip side of it, if you get the grant from the EIDL, let's just say you get the full $10,000, and you apply for a program with the PPP, and you get approved for 50 grand from them, and you're applying to hope that that 50 grand gets forgiven, which I'll talk about and how that works with the PPP side of it. Your forgiveness on the PPP is reduced by how much you got of free money in the grant, which makes sense, right? So if you got 10 grand here and you're applying for 50 grand on the PPP, you can only reduce the first 40 grand of that note because the government already gave you 10 grand of free money, if that makes sense.
No, thank you. It
So I
does.
hope that answers that question.
All right, another next question. How soon should we expect the email regarding the balance of the process? Are they giving any indication yet of how long this process is going to take, or is it kind of up in the air still?
So I want to be clear on this one too, because when you submit your application for the EIDL, when you read it, it seems to sound like you're going to get a $10,000 grant within 3 days of application. And I want to be totally clear that the SBA, the federal government, and the banks for that matter, they're not prepared for the amount of volume that's come in. Again, we're at application number 890,000 right now. Well, actually, as of last night, we're probably close to a million at this point. There's over 1 million people that have applied in a short process of a week, right? Now, let's just do the rough number math in your head. Let's say each person that you need to talk to as a loan officer is going to be 15 minutes, right? That means each loan officer working 8 hour a day is only able to do 32 people. Right now, if you're dividing that by 1 million, how many loan officers do you need and how many days you need to have to get this done? This could take a while for the exact process to actually happen. So my estimations is it's going to take 2, if not 3 weeks to get the first initial email from the SBA to set up a time to have a conversation with a loan officer. Also, when you apply, I know we all got spam calls all the time, right? You don't want to be avoiding any phone calls from this point moving forward, because we don't know if the SBA is actually going to call first or send an email. There is no actual official workflow in that, what that looks like. But my estimations is it's probably going to be about 3 weeks or so before you get an email to schedule time to talk to an SBA officer. And when you talk to an SBA officer, you better make sure that you have your P&Ls ready, your tax returns ready, and any forms that they need. Because if you need to reschedule that call, you might be like, okay, our next appointment September 15th. Or September 18th, which day works better for you, right? So timing is of the absolute essence. Also understand that when you're dealing with the federal government, it could take months for things to actually roll out. So for this to roll out and be implemented already within a couple of days, the back end side of it is going to be very complex. It's going to take time, right? So don't expect to make an application, because I've been getting text messages all the time and Facebook messages from folks saying, hey, Eric, I applied for this thing 3 days ago. I haven't seen any direct deposit come on my bank account. Yeah, unfortunately, that's not the timeline that we should be expecting. Expect at least 2 to 3 weeks just for the initial conversation with the SBA loan officer, and probably another week or two after that to get funding in order for, as a realistic timeline. And it may be longer than that. It may be shorter, but you got to imagine they have to really scale up their hiring, or maybe hire contractors or something like that, just to process the loan applications that have gone in on the EIDL. And that's a big challenge on the PPP, which I'll talk about when we discuss the PPP loan. But were there any other questions at all, brother?
I think that's good for right now. Let's go ahead and move forward with the PPP.
Excellent, Sean. So let's talk about the PPP and what that is and what it isn't. So the PPP, you can see I prepared a nice little whiteboard thing for you guys here. Did some homework for all of y'all. So the PPP is called a Payroll Protection Plan, and this rolled out as part of the CARES Act that was not last Friday, but the previous Friday, about a week ago. Congress, the Senate, and Donald Trump came together. They finally passed this legislation where they approved up to $340 billion for small business owners under the CARE Act. And as part of it, the key provision is called the Payroll Protection Plan, or PPP. Now, again, they realize that small business owners like you and I, regardless of political preference or whatever, they realize that small business owners like you and I hire the majority of Americans right now. Over 60% of Americans are employed by small business owners with businesses less than 500 employees. So it's in their best interest to make sure that we as employers survive and are able to fund and pay for our employees, because as many of you may have seen in the news, the unemployment rate prior to this all falling apart was floating between 150 to 300,000 per week. And the following week, once this all started rolling out, it went to 3.8 million and then another 2.8 million as of last week. So we have like over 6 million people unemployed. So in order to prevent that bleeding and to allow people to still continue working and keep small businesses afloat, they released what they call the payroll protection plan. And this is how it works. The whole design of this is to give you short-term funding for your payroll for 2.5 months to allow you to cover your overhead for your employees so you can still operate your business without bleeding cash out to pay for employees. So this one's a little bit different, whereas the EIDL, the loan balance is probably going to be based on all of your overhead and expenses. This one is purely based on what you pay in payroll. Now, payroll means what you pay employees, including yourself if you're an S corporation, W-2 wages under $100,000 per person. Now, so if you're making over 100 grand from your company, you're capped out at 100 grand per year as a benefit from this. And then so what they do is they take your annualized payroll. Let's say your payroll, and again, I'm just using big numbers, easy numbers to divide because it's a Monday. So let's say your payroll is 1.2 million a year. That means your monthly payroll expense is 100,000 per month. $100,000 per month. The SBA is going to allow you to borrow 2.5 times that. That means you can borrow $250,000 to use towards your payroll and specific other expenses, right? So that's the way, in general, that's how the loan balance side of it works. It's for businesses that are considered small businesses, meaning less than 500 employees, depending on classification. And you can be a sole proprietor, LLC, or corporation. Now, this first phase of it that released on Friday of last week is for companies that pay for W-2 wages. Now, they are planning on opening it up in another week or so for those of you who might be a DBA or a sole proprietor. Maybe you're just an independent disaster recovery contractor or disaster restoration contractor. You just work on your own. They're going to plan to open it up next week for folks like you to be able to apply for this program. But right now, it's designed for folks that are paying W-2 wages and paying payroll tax for their employees. They're looking for similar things. They just want to just validate your credit, make sure that you are a good payment risk. No collateral, no guarantee is needed, and payroll needs to be paid. They're looking at payroll that was paid up until January 31st of 2020. So I have a lot of clients that own gyms and restaurants, and they're like, Eric, I had to lay off some people just starting the month of March because everything started falling apart then. Well, they're not going to penalize you for laying people off after January 31st. And you also have the option of rehiring them to get the increased and larger loan amount from the federal government. Now, you're probably asking me, Eric, why would I want to borrow money from the federal government? And why would I want to borrow money from the federal government in order to pay for my payroll? So here's what's really cool about this program. When you borrow money from the federal government to help you cover your payroll under this particular plan, the payroll protection plan, they will potentially forgive your entire loan balance if you utilize the expenses properly and document the expenses properly. So what does that mean? Let's say if I was that small business owner that had the $1.2 million payroll, which one of my clients does, he's paying 100 grand per month for employees, and he's borrowing $250,000 from the federal government, from the SBA. Why would you want to take this program? There's forgiveness involved with it. Forgiveness means that loan amount of $250,000, if you properly utilize the funds, if you properly documented where you used it, you don't have to owe that money anymore. It's just forgiven money. It's tax-free. It's not going to trigger a cancellation of debt or anything from what Congress has written out. So it's basically tax-free money to help you pay for the payroll of your employees. So how does that forgiveness work? How does it work when I borrow 50 grand from the federal government for this PPP and not have to pay it back? How does that work? Well, you have to spend that money in 8 weeks following the date you get funded. So let's say you get funded right now, we're April 6th. So let's say you get funded April 6th. Now you have 8 weeks to spend all that money, which pushes you to April, May. Now you're in June. Let's just say June 6th, right? So you had to spend up all that money by June 6th if you got funded today. And then you have to use it for these specific categories: for payroll, mortgage interest or rent on the business related property, and utilities. Those are the only three categories you could use this money for if you want to take the forgiveness clause. Now, if you're on the payroll side, you have to spend 70% of the loan money on payroll. Remaining 30% could be used for mortgage, rent, or utilities. Actually, let me correct that. I believe it's changed to 75%. So as long as you spend 75% of the money that the government lets you borrow on payroll within 8 weeks, and then the rest of it you spend on rent, interest, and utilities, you could have the entire balance that you borrowed from the federal government forgiven. So if you borrow that $500,000, or if you borrow that $250,000, or if you borrow that $50,000, and you play by the rules, you could have that forgiven, which is super unique, really unique. And this is where I like to say it's free money from the government. There's some catches to it. The catches are you have to play by the rules. You have to use it for what they designate it for. But it's free money from the government to help you run your business, because this is the reality of it. I don't know any business that has not been impacted by this pandemic. Now, some businesses are doing extraordinarily well because of the pandemic, so they're impacted positively. But the vast majority of American businesses that I've spoken to have been impacted negatively from this pandemic. So here's an opportunity from the federal government to be able to borrow money to cover your payroll, to keep your employees on staff, to keep food on the table of your employees and for yourself, and get that entirely waived from the federal government, which is really neat. There's an interest rate on it right now that's 1%, so 1% interest rate. And it's designed to be like a 12-month loan. The whole idea is this is going to be used to cover payroll and paid off within a year. But obviously, if you're utilizing the money properly, it's going to be paid off probably in about 2 or 3 months. So that's how the PPP program works. It's a way where you can effectively get free money from the government to pay for your employees. If you're a sole proprietor, DBA, if you're just a one-man shop, this could potentially be opened up in about a week or so for folks like that. But right now it's designed for employers that have W-2 wages that they pay out. Okay, so it's a really unique program. So you're looking at two different programs. You got the EIDL, which I talked about, has an up to $10,000 grant plus money for operations. And then you have this PPP, which is really wonderful if you have employees or folks that work for you to be able to borrow money from the government and effectively get that totally wiped out. And I think for me as a business owner, I think it's fiscally responsible for all of us, if these are appropriate products, to apply for it, because your competitors are all applying for this stuff right now, and it's going to give them an unfair advantage above you if you don't utilize the funding that the government's availing to you in order for you to help you operate your business, regardless of what you think about debt or anything like that. Because I've heard, like, there's Dave Ramsey, I believe it is. Dave Ramsey is strident about not taking on debt. But if the federal government allows you to forgive that note by playing by the rules, and it allows you to impact and improve your business, I don't see what the challenge is with applying for these programs. There are some challenges on the bank side of it right now. They opened up last Friday, and because everything has happened so quickly, banks are not prepared for it. Wells Fargo, they closed up all their inbound applications for this. They can't take any more volume, and it's only been 3 days. Chase Bank has closed up all their inbound applications for this program. Again, it's only been 3 days. Bank of America is only taking information, and people are hoping to get called back from Bank of America. So it is kind of a mess on this back end of it, because a lot of folks, we are fearful that funding will dry up. I know Donald Trump, he tweeted last weekend that that he'll open up more funding for it. But again, we don't know where that actually will happen. So there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of people talking about, a lot of people trying to apply for it, but it's a bit of a quagmire right now. End of the day, if you're a business owner, I highly recommend looking at both these programs, applying for both these programs if they're appropriate for you, and then utilizing these programs to help you operate your business in these challenging times. Sean, do you know if was there any questions on this?
Yeah, we have a couple questions real quick. One of them is, would this qualify for limited partners, where there are only partners who take distributions and only receive a K-1, no W-2s, and the LP? do you think the PPP program will run out before everyone's reviewed? So you kind of had two questions there.
Yeah, great question. So the first one with the LP, the limited partners, the way this works, it's not designed for guaranteed payments for limited partners. This is designed just purely for payroll. It can't be used for profit distributions. It's only for payroll itself. If you utilize the funds for general partners or limited partners profit distribution, then you violate the act of where you violate the terms of service of doing this. And that can be actually a federal felony. So you don't want to do that. You want to use it strictly to funnel towards payroll, and you want to use it strictly to funnel towards your rent, mortgage interest, and utilities. And there's on the application, they actually sign off on that these funds are used specifically for these functions. So if you got an LP that's just taking a profit distribution on a K1, that would not count for this. It would only be for right now folks who are being paid in format of W-2 wages. And what was that question? That second question, Sean?
He was just asking again about the PPP program. What do you think? Do you believe the funds will run out once everyone's reviewed, or do you feel like we are going to get that support from the federal government to keep going with it, or where's your thought on that?
Yeah, great question. I'll be honest, Sean. Like, if I could predict what the federal government's going to do, I probably wouldn't be here. I'd probably be gambling on what the federal government's going to do and be making money on that, right? The federal government right now, we have, and again, like I'm a relatively non-political person. You're dealing with two different political parties that are at arms against each other. So the notion that for them to pass an extension of a bill or an expansion of the bill, is it possible? Is it probable? It's possible. Is it probable? I don't know. It depends on the will of Washington and depends on the will of Congress, the Senate, all the political parties to come together and come to terms with it. I wouldn't put any type of bet on what the government or the federal government's planning to do. All I know, because my main business is I'm a tax strategist in a fractional. All I know is I am going to work within the framework of what was given right now because I can't predict the future. I can only predict what was given to me in this particular framework, right? So on that said, will funds dry up? They allocated $380 billion to this program, which sounds like a lot of money. But the reality is when you look at the volumes of people who are applying right now, and especially on the EIDL side, which has less paperwork, over almost 1 million people within the course of a week, the funds are going to dry up sooner than later. So the EIDL, timing-wise, I think there's probably going to be about another 2 weeks worth of funding inside of it before there's no more space for any new applications. For the PPP side, right now we're in the beginning of April and things are just rolling out. If you're planning to apply in May or June, it might be too late at that point.
Okay.
Especially the volume of people who are applying right now. The sooner you could get in, or in a timely basis, timely format, because maybe you do need to get your P&L straightened out. Maybe you do need to get all your payroll reports straightened out. But the sooner you could apply, the better.
Cool. Another question. What if you had to lay off employees before you receive your PPP money? Will that conflict with the forgiveness process?
Yeah, so two really interesting strategies behind it. If you had to lay off employees prior to getting the PPP and then you got funded with the PPP, you have the option of rehiring those employees and paying them what they normally were being paid before to allow you to stay within the constraints of your PPP. Now, if you lay them off and you don't plan on rehiring them, the percentage of forgiveness will also be proportionally reduced. So let's say if you laid off 25% of your workforce in terms of volume of payroll, then your allocation of what you could have forgiven, let's say if you borrow 40 grand, now you can only have 30 grand forgiven. So they'll reduce proportionately depending on the amount of payroll hours that were lost when that layoff happened.
Another question, what about a sole proprietor who's is only one employee and uses subcontractors and other work? I remember seeing something in the PPP program that would include subcontractors. Do you know any more details about that?
Yeah, that part of the plan is supposed to be opened up on the 10th, which is this Friday, for sole proprietors to apply for it. I don't know exactly how they're going to plan to do it because sole proprietors, we don't. So I'm an S corp, but I was a sole proprietor before in many of my other businesses. We don't pay ourselves payroll when you're a sole proprietor. Basically, the way you realize your profit is when you file your tax return or do your P&L, and you see okay, here are all my expenses, here's all my outgoing stuff, and here's my net profit at the end of the year. So it's not like a normal payroll where you pay yourself on W-2. So what I'm speculating is when you go into the bank or when you apply with the bank, they're going to ask you for the annualized profit, divide that by 12, and that's what they're going to determine as the payroll number. So let's say, for example, your business profited, let's say it's $60,000 per year, then the bank is going to divide that by 12, which is $5,000 a month, then multiply it by 2.5, which means you could borrow 5 times 2.5 is 12,005, for example. That's what I think how I think they're going to calculate it. Here's the biggest challenge is like the SBA really hasn't done the greatest job. The SBA and the US Treasury hasn't done the greatest job explaining these requirements to bankers. So right now, a lot of bankers, they all have different ways of calculating the amount to qualify for this program. Plus with the volume they got going in, it's kind of a mess right now. So I don't know exactly how they're going to be calculating it, but yes, they will open it up for sole proprietors, DBAs, single owner LLCs that don't pay yourself a traditional W-2 payroll starting on Friday the 10th, supposedly. So we'll see what happens.
Another question was, how about if you have an employee that you're paying as a 1099? So like a lot of these companies have, people on payroll, but then they have a few guys that they subcontract or 1099. Will the PPP, how will that affect that?
Yeah, so the PPP right now in the format, the way it is, like it doesn't allow for 1099 contractors to be listed as a payroll expense, which is a shame because I have 1099 contractors that work for me. Because the whole thing is on the backside, the 1099 contractors can apply for the PPP on their own, right? So if you were to get the 1099 contractors and the PPP for it, and then your 1099 contractors could also apply for a PPP, that's almost like effectively double dipping, which isn't necessarily fair to the business owner that's paying contractors, but that's the way it's written out right now, at
Okay.
least to my understanding.
One question I've been asked before this webinar. So let's just say you have a business, you still have revenue coming in. So let's just say you qualify for 100,000 in payroll with PPP, and then you're still bringing in over $100,000 in cash a month with new sales or services. Will that affect when you go to pay back? Do you have to distinguish where that money that came in from the loan is being paid back to payroll versus the other money that you typically might pay it with? Or how do you have to be careful there so you don't get into any liability issues or mismanagement of funds?
Yeah, that's a really good question. What I'd highly recommend doing is just, it comes down to documentation and how ambiguous your documentation is,
Mhm.
right? So the way it works is you're going to have this funding for 8 weeks. 10 weeks later, you have this window of opportunity to submit an application for forgiveness. Now, in the application for forgiveness, you're going to have to list all the expenses that you had paid out. Now, here's the thing. It's going to be done by your banker. It's not going to be done by the IRS. It's not going to be done by an SBA person. And it's in the banker's best interest to get the note forgiven. So as long as you could document and show with canceled checks or bank statements where that money went and how much went out, I don't think there's a clean way of distinguishing if it is PPP money or incoming revenue from the business. At the end of the day, as long as you had spent the same amount of what you had borrowed for the PPP on these expenses, then the SBA has no additional restrictions or jurisdiction around that, at least in my understanding. Because at the end of the day, the bankers and the loan facilitators are the ones that are going to be doing that back end compliance, not the SBA and not the U.S. Treasury.
Okay, thank you. And then one other question: what happens if you offer laid off employees to come back to work after you receive your PPP, but they decline because they can draw more from unemployment? Since I heard they are raising the amount of unemployment, are you seeing that as any conflict or issue with businesses coming out?
Yeah, I probably get that in half of the engagement calls that I have with clients that are looking to have our team handle this stuff for them. That is definitely a situation. And at the end of the day, it comes down to if the employees are looking to come back or not. And if they're not, then they just proportionally reduce that side of the forgiveness side of it. And that's just kind of like the cost of doing business in a way of trying to figure out what's a variable thing you can control and what's a variable thing that you can't control. End of the day, let's say if the employees don't come back and you can only have 40,000 forgiven instead of 50,000, that's $40,000 more of money that you didn't have before, right? So at the end of the day, can there be challenges on employees coming back if you laid them off because they're making more money on unemployment? Totally possible. And let's be totally real. Like, American citizens right now need as much as they can, cash wise, income wise, to make a living. We can't judge folks on their decisions to come back to work or not after getting paid more on unemployment. I mean, they got to do what's best for their families, right? But at the same time, us as business owners need to look at it from a business perspective, and instead of getting attached to bring people on to get it all forgiven, realizing, shoot, I'm still getting 75% of the loan balance forgiven anyway. That's money that I wouldn't have had if I didn't have employees to get to have operating in my business from the get-go. So it's just like a different framework, a different like thought process on it, because I know some of my clients that kind of got really emotional about it. It's like, I can't believe they're not coming back. They're just freeloading off the system. I was like, no, they, they're supporting their families. They're making the decisions they need to make for their families. Like, we can't judge them for that. But like at the end of the day, you're getting 75% of this loan balance as free money from the federal government by staying in compliance with it. Like, everyone's winning here. It's like, I don't see a loss for anybody except down the road, like if there's higher taxes or inflation. But that's further down the road. Just kick the ball down the road a little bit. But outside of that, like, that is a potential hiccup. But at the same time, too, when you look at what you can potentially be getting in forgivable money, I don't think that should really be a big concern.
Okay. What are the tax consequences on forgiveness of the $100,000 that I may receive? Are we going to see any tax situations after this is all blowing over? Do you feel like it's going to come back to bite you if you take advantage of this free money?
Great question. So it was written in by Congress. Congress wrote into the bill that the forgiven money is non-taxable. Now, some of you in the past might have had credit cards where you had to cancel credit cards out, or you had like loan balances forgiven in negotiation and normally get a 1099-C of cancellation of debt, and you had to report as income. This clause, the forgiveness clause, because of Congress writing it in, no longer has a potential taxable ramification. Same thing with the $10,000 grant from the EIDL. It was written into it that it's non-taxable.
Okay, thank you. Well, do you have any final questions? Eric, what is the best way for them to get a hold of you if they do have questions, if they're interested in working with you? I know you work with several multi-million-dollar businesses around the country. I personally can vouch that if you're looking for an incredible tax strategist, Eric is the guy to go to. Every question I've ever had, he comes back with a clear answer and puts us in the right direction. But Eric, what would be the best way for them to get a hold of you if they have any questions?
Yeah, there's two ways. They could either get to me on my website, which is thecashflowdoctor.com, and you can book like a free appointment just to have a quick conversation with me. So go to thecashflowdoctor.com, or you can also hit me up on Instagram. Right now, my cell phone is blowing up and Facebook Messenger is blowing up. But if you want to go to my Instagram, it's at thecashflowdoctor. You can also send me a direct message there. I'd be more than happy to answer that you have.
Awesome. Yeah, I just put the link for Instagram and his website in the chat box as well. Eric, I don't think there's any more questions, but I just really want to thank you today. There were some people, something happened in Zoom with all the security restrictions. It didn't send out the follow-up email. So I'm going to make sure it gets sent out to another group of people that weren't able to make it live. But we really appreciate you, man, jumping in on this and sharing your wisdom, man. This has been extremely beneficial for myself, and I'm sure everybody listening right now.
Yeah, of course. I'm on a mission right now to save as many American businesses as I can. That's like my main objective. Because at the end of the day, like, I know that entrepreneurs, business owners like you and I are really the only real good driving force in the world today. I mean, we can't rely on government to do things. We can't rely on nonprofits to make the change that we want to make. So I strongly feel like that the stronger of a position I can help small business owners be in, the stronger of an impact we can all make to the nonprofits that we love and the impact and the charities that we love down the road. So anything I could do to be of service to entrepreneur groups like what you have here, this awesome thing that you got going on, Sean, like, I'm more than happy to be part of it.
Well, thank you. And I'm sure everybody else appreciates it very much. Eric, I'll definitely be reaching out to you this week because I have some things to go over with you. But thank you again for doing this. And man, we look forward to hope many people get to connect with you and definitely build that relationship with you.
Of course. Hope everyone has a wonderful day. And don't forget, go apply for that money before it runs out.
All right. Sounds good, Eric. Thanks a lot. We'll talk to you soon.
You got it. Thank you.
Bye.